95% of the murderers, and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 21. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. So you want to spend the money for a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana, they're all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them up against the wall and Christmas. And then they say, oh, I don't want that, I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
Hello, family. This is African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tony Cherie. I want to talk about today what is going on inside of the Democratic Party, and in particularly what is going on with the Black Caucus. So if you have not heard, the former mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, who is a billionaire, who has a very checkered history of racist comments, he is running for president against Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, all these people. Now, this guy kind of came out of nowhere and basically is paying for his candidacy with his money out of his pocket because he's a billionaire and has money to where he could just put himself on TV. He doesn't have to worry about getting support from the community, from the American society. All he has to worry about is putting his own money into buying ads and not actually fundraising. Which is kind of similar to what Trump did. If you remember, a lot of Trump's money that went towards his political campaign actually came out of his pocket. So it's interesting that a lot of people aren't condemning this because from what the Democrats say, they said that they're anti-Trump. But it's funny that one of their own is kind of taking a similar route as Trump, and they don't seem to have a problem with this. Now, ordinarily, I don't talk about politics on this channel, but I do have to talk about it when it comes to my community, the African community in the United States, doing things that are, once again, compromising our political leverage, doing things that are not going to actually actualize inside of anything for our community. And the support of Michael Bloomberg from some Black people, and is growing more and more, his support in the Black community, supposedly, according to polls, is one of those things that should be very troubling to us. Because this is, once again, not just a candidate who is indifferent to the Black community. This is a candidate who has been openly hostile to the Black community. Now, the thing that I cannot stand when it comes to our political awareness is that it seems that our people do not learn our lessons. Because if we did learn our lesson, for example, from a Bill Clinton who was very supported in the Black community, despite the fact that he was doing a number of things or took a number of policy positions before he became president. Because remember, when Bill Clinton was running, he had basically done things that subscribed to the super predator narrative of Black Americans. So before he became president, he had already shown racist sentiment and appealed to the racists inside of the South. So once again, we have a candidate who has said things that are racist. We have a candidate who has done things that are suspect, and we are not feeling the fact that this is someone who's actually assaulted our community. We're not actually responding appropriately, because I promise you, if this man had done some of the policies he did against Black communities, if he had done that to any other community, if he had done that to the Latinx community, if he had done that to the Jewish community, to the Native American community, the response would be more organized. The response would be, you need to not just offer an apology, you need to make amends for the things, the destruction you have done to our communities. But for some reason with us, an apology will clear everything. An apology will undo everything. For example, they apologize for slavery, but they're not willing to give reparations. But hey, they apologize. Apologies are not good enough. We have to have the same energy and the same outrage that other communities have whenever they're assaulted. Because guess what? For the Jews in World War II, Was it just enough for the Germans to apologize for the Holocaust? No, you had to make reparations. For the Japanese who were interned during World War II, was it just enough for the United States government to apologize? No, you had to make reparations. For us, we are fine with an apology. He apologized for stop and frisk, which is a racist policy that targeted Black communities, and that's enough for us. That should never be enough. You should actually want something that's going to make amends. What are you going to do now as president that's going to undo what you did with stop and frisk? Why should we vote for you? How are you going to change this actual situation and not just add to it? These are the things that intelligent people, politically astute people, advocate for on their behalf. We're not advocating for our behalf. We're advocating for our egos. That's what apologies are for. They're for your egos. That's what compliments are for. Compliments are only for your egos. So I'm going to read through this article on CBS, and it's Bloomberg, endorsed by 3 members of the Congressional Black Caucus after the stop and frisk apology. Now, there was one candidate in the 2020 presidential race who wasn't on the ballot in New Hampshire. Mike Bloomberg is running an unconventional campaign fueled by his own millions. But even before his name appeared on a primary ballot, he's already facing controversy over his policies when he was the mayor of New York City. Bloomberg expressed regret about comments he made in 2015 about stop and frisk. He said, "We put all the cops in minority neighborhoods." Yes, that's true. Bloomberg is heard in a recording saying, "But why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is." Bloomberg is also heard saying, "You can just take the description of a male, minorities age 16 to 25, and Xerox it and paste it out to all cops." So this guy is saying basically that when it comes to criminals, we already know what they are. They are Black, they are this age, and we can basically stop and frisk you just based on that description. And of course, this is the creation of a lot of stereotypes, or rather the furthering of a lot of stereotypes about our people, that we are thugs, that we are criminals. And these are stereotypes that have been fueled since slavery. Yet he was very sure that this was an okay thing to say, not a lot of time ago. This is only in 2015. So that was at most 5 years ago. He then basically tried to paint over the fact that he made these comments in the past and said, "I inherited the police practice of stop and frisk. As part of our effort to stop gun violence, it was overused. By the time I left office, I cut it back to 95%, but I should have apologized and done it faster and sooner." Now, let me comment right here when he says, "I did it for gun violence." I often cringe when I hear people say, we're trying to stop gun violence by helping, by these certain policies. And they try to make it like they're targeting mass shooting. And of course, the main arbitrators of mass shootings are white males. And so the idea is that we're going to deracialize these policies. We're not doing it because you're Black. We're doing it because we're afraid of gun violence. But if we're honest, gun violence for mass shootings is very different from the type of violence that is associated with poor Black communities, because more likely than not, the guns that are used whenever our people are killed in our communities are not registered. They're not going to be assault rifles. They're not going to be AK-47s. They're not going to be the same types of weapons. The policies are very different that would help our people versus the ones that would help the mass shooting. So I'm just pointing this out to say this is a tactic used in politics, and that is to try to make it seem like, oh, we're trying to help this problem, although that problem has nothing to do with this problem. The violence that does occur in Black communities has nothing to do with mass shootings. So to try to act like this is not a racist policy because you're trying to help gun violence in general is disingenuous. So he goes on to say that I regret that, and I have apologized, and I take responsibility for taking too long to understand the impact it had on Black and Latino communities. Now, let's be honest, none of us are expecting for the Democrats to not be racist. I hope you're not. I hope you don't think that because someone's saying what you want to hear, that they do not have any racism or any racist sentiments. And I don't care if it's Bernie Sanders. I don't care if it's Joe Biden. I don't care if it's Barack Obama. A lot of these people have racist sentiments. And I'm pointing this out to say that we should understand, number one, we don't need people to be our friends. We don't need people to like us. We don't need people to even not be racist. But we do need to have a degree of political leverage inside of the situation to where we can ensure that people are actually going to do things for our community and not just give us lip service and not just apologize and not just do things that are going to backfire on us once they get elected. And this is not something that we've been good at doing. This is not something we've been efficient at doing, because as we see, Bloomberg basically has a racist policy. He says, well, it wasn't my fault, which it was his fault. The policy was began by him. But he says, it wasn't my fault, but, I've changed since 2015. Since 2015, we know he hasn't changed. But what has changed is the stakes have changed. Before, he was appealing to people who wanted stop and frisk. Before, he was appealing to people who wanted that type of enforcement of crime. If you talk to people, a lot of people who were living in New York at that time, they talk about how awesome it was when stop and frisk was happening, not for Black people, but for the white community, because to them, oh, this is amazing. We have everything under control. We have social control over the issues. So this was a great policy for them. But for us, obviously, that's not the case. The thing is, like, Bloomberg needs us in a situation because the Black vote is basically the vote that, for some reason, has been more aligned with Biden. And Bloomberg, as a policy official, is more closely with Biden. So basically, the Black community has not been supporting Bernie Sanders. They've been supporting Biden. And so Bloomberg understands that if he's going to still Biden's position as a moderate, he has to basically still the black vote. So the stakes have changed for him. Before, he didn't need the Black vote when he was in New York City. He didn't need it. He needs it now that he's running for a presidential race and that he's trying to get a holding of a population that Bernie Sanders does not have a holding of. So these are the things of convenience. They're going to say what they want whenever they want to do something that's going to get the results that they want to get. But understand, when the stakes change, they're going to flip, because the same thing happened with Obama. Obama was saying all these things for the Black community whenever he was running for election. But when the stakes flipped and he needed the white vote, when he needed those outside of our community, and he knew he had a lock on the Black vote, that's when you see him not talking so Black. That's where you hear him say things like, well, I'm not the president of the Black community, I'm the president of everyone. That's where you hear him talking differently. So understand that these people are only going to be your friend and say things to make you feel good as long as they have a stake in your vote. But the thing is that you should be worried about is, number one, not assuring your vote, because if they have a reason to actually try to actually get your vote, that's going to motivate them to not just get the vote, but actually follow through on the policies. Because when a lot of times what happens is they give lip service, but they actually don't follow up with it once they're elected, because there's no stakes for them anymore. You already voted for them and you're going to vote for them again. So these are things we talk about all the time in this channel, and I can't stop talking about it because, as we see, and I'm about to read on, our people still fall for the okie doke. And so we have to keep addressing these issues, keep addressing political awareness, keep addressing the lack of intelligence when it comes to politics that our people shows, because clearly this is an issue that hasn't stopped, and we still have not learned our lesson from Obama, from Trump, from any of the presidencies. We're still repeating the same old issues. So let's go on. He says, So the former mayor said that he's not worried his comments could hurt his vote with voters of color. He said that on Wednesday, and Bloomberg rolled out endorsements from 3 members of the Black Caucus: Georgia Congresswoman Lucy McBath, Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York, and Delegate Stacey Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands. He said, I think we are going to do very well in the African American community. Now, understand the arrogance of what he just said. He just said that, yeah, I just basically unrolled a policy when I was mayor that was a racist policy. And yeah, I used racially targeted language to basically incite the criminality of the Black man, to incite the ransacking of Black communities under the false premise that all Black people are criminals. Yes, I use that language, but I'm still not worried about losing the Black vote. If that arrogance does not tell you that something is wrong that these Democrats be having, that arrogance to say that despite the fact that I have not done anything to rectify this issue, I have not put anything on the table that would rectify this issue, I still will get the black vote. I'm not worried about it because guess what? I've had talks with these guys over here and they're going to endorse me. And that's all black people need. They don't need for you to actually talk about things, to actually actualize a policy. No, all they need is for you to is to see their leaders, to see their Black Caucus members actually say that we're going to vote for him. And I'm very curious. I'd love to hear why, what justification. I know why, because these are people who are not devoted to the Black community, not devoted to what's going on with us. They're instead devoted to their own political livelihood. I know why they're going to take those policies. It's strong. I know why, but are they going to admit to why? Are they going to say why? What possible explanation can you get for that? I mean, out of all the candidates, I can even see, okay, I'm going to go for someone like a Biden, because, hey, at least what he said that was racist was in the 90s. This is someone that just said something openly racist, and he didn't change his position until recently, 5 years ago. So out of all the candidates, and again, I'm not for any of them as being good for our community personally. There's obviously some who are better than not, and if we'd be kidding to say that we'd be kidding if we thought that Biden or Bloomberg getting elected versus a Bernie Sanders getting elected would not be positive for the fact that there are spheres of the American economy that affect us more than others, one being healthcare. So we'd be silly to say that some candidates would not be beneficial compared to others. So that's not what I'm saying, but I don't support any of them as being good for us, if that makes sense. I don't think any of them are going to do anything out of the ordinary for us. I don't think any of their presidencies are going to mean anything as far as our social position in the American economy. But there obviously are some who I do think would take stances such as against mass incarceration or for Medicare for all. These are stances that if you'd be silly if you don't think that it's not going to help Black people who are poor. But out of all the candidates, why would you choose Bloomberg? That's the thing I don't understand. What possible reason? If you're, as someone in the Black Caucus, what possible reason? What are you going to say to Black people that you want with probably, I don't want to qualify who's the most racist, but we'll say from the recordings, we'll say the most clear and blatant, in recent times as far as their positions or their feelings on Black people. How do you justify that? How do you justify that to the people who voted for you? How do you justify that to the African American community? How do you justify being a political chump for once again in another election cycle? And it's going to keep happening as long as we look at the Democratic Party as our saviors instead of looking at ourselves as our saviors and looking at what we need versus what we want to hear. These are things that we need to know. So going on, so he thinks he's going to do very well at the Black community, as he said, and he's digging into former Vice President Joe Biden's support among African American voters, which has fallen to 27% since December. And Biden too, I was like, why are y'all supporting him? Why support the candidates with a history of blatantly racist messages? I don't get that. Out of all the candidates, why not at least go for the ones that are at least somewhat neutral? Who haven't been so outward with it, who haven't been so apparent with it. What makes you want to go with the ones who aren't? I don't get it. I don't get the psychology. If any of you are a psychologist, if any of you have studied this, I don't get it. I've read, one article saying, well, maybe we just want to go with who we think is going to win, but it has to be something deeper than that because it just doesn't make sense. Why would you go with the most racist candidate? Why would you go with the ones who are speaking out against your people openly, who have just a history of racially derogatory statements? I just don't get it. So maybe one of you who understand the philosophy or ideology of Black people, let me know in the comments. But so he's been digging at Joe Biden. Now Biden, who's trying to keep his Black vote, says, understand this isn't the same environment where people have gone against reparations, because it's clear, if you don't know, reparations is not happening anytime soon. And if you need any proof of it, look at how the Democrats basically swept it under the rug. I don't believe it's happening at all personally, because I just don't see the white power structure doing reparations. But if they were to do it, it would have to be from a position of power and not from a position of begging. Now, Biden said, you can't win a general election as a Democrat unless you have the overwhelming support from Black and brown voters. It's really just that simple. How different does he sound, right? I mean, this is the same person who did not want to talk about reparations, just like all the other candidates. They didn't want to talk about reparations. But now that he has a stake in it, now that he realizes he's probably going to lose the primary, now he says you can't win the election without the Black vote. And they say Black and brown vote. But we know without the Black vote, because Black people are the most loyal to Biden, he would not win. Just Black people, just pay attention to these things. Like, these are strategies being used to basically fool you. And once he has the Black vote on lock again, if he were to get it on lock again, trust me, it's going to flip again, because he has no incentive. He has no reason not to. What are we going to do if he doesn't? What are we going to do? Are we going to not vote in the next election? No, because Black people are going to start saying, if you don't vote, you know, our ancestors, they died for the right to vote. Although some of our ancestors who did die or was beaten for the right to vote would not have wanted us to have been in a compulsory voting system where we're voting for racists. But forget that. Never mind that. We have to vote because our ancestors, they fought for the right to vote. The other thing that's going to happen is that they're going to guilt us and say, oh, if you don't vote, then this person's going to win. If you don't vote, then this is going to happen. And these are scare tactics. And my question is, in conclusion for this video, at what point do we try to say, okay, doing the same thing over and over again every 4 years, because we know most Black people do not vote, except for in federal elections, but they especially don't vote in local politics. But every 4 years, over and over again, we've been doing the same thing ever since we've gotten the right to vote. Voting for the Democrats. Voting for the Democrats. That is what we've been doing. This is the most you see Black people organize. This is the most you see us talk about doing something as a collective, more than talking about supporting Black businesses, more than talking about connecting with the motherland. You hear more of us talk about vote. I'm saying this to say that we've been doing the same thing for what? It's been over 50 years now, and nothing has changed. So clearly, this is not the thing that we should be focused on. Clearly, elections and politics, especially on a federal level, is not where we're going to see any results. So at what point do we say, let's stop this foolishness? Let's just do a moratorium. If we're going to vote, fine. But for right now, let's say no. No more of this election stuff. No more. We're going to focus on what is going on. We're going to do a serious study of what we need. What do we want? What are we going to get in America? Nothing's changing. There's no sign of anything changing. There's no sign of reparations. There's no sign of the mass incarceration system ending. There's no sign of anything, any type of reform, healthcare for us. There's no sign of anything for us. So what do we have to do to get us out of this situation? That's what needs to happen. All this other stuff, vote for him or get Trump out of office. As much as I can't stand Donald Trump being in office, I'm not of the impression that him being in office has changed our social position as a people. So, guys, I'm going to stop this video now, but I want to hear what you have to say about this topic. What is your thoughts on this whole election debacle with Bloomberg and Biden and so on? But that's all I have. I will see you guys in the next video.